Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Big Idea. I'm your host for this program today. I'm the U.S. spokesperson for the Mission to ASEAN, and my name is Jason Seymour. We started this show because we know that there are so many Southeast Asian leaders who have big ideas, and they have done more than just talk about those big ideas. They've actually turned those big ideas into a reality. And these leaders inspire all of us. So today we have one of these inspirational leaders. I'm so excited to talk to her, and she is Emily Tang. Adid, please bring in Emily.
Hi, spokesperson Seymour. Lovely to
Thanks so much. Excellent. Welcome to the show. We have so much to talk about today because you have done so many activities that have made such a difference in people's lives. But I first want to mention say a huge thank you to you because you're actually located in California today. And that means that you are talking to us at midnight. So have you had some coffee, some tea?
Yep, I've got my bottle of tea with me here. Pacing around, getting my heart rate pumping, but so thankful and honored to be here with you.
Excellent. And we're joining I'm joining you with some guava juice here, so we'll have a drink together. So my first question about staying awake and staying alert. So we both work really hard at what we do, and sometimes we have very long days. And I'm just wondering if you have any tips for our audience. How do you stay alert after a long day? What are your secrets to keep your energy going?
I do one of two things. Either if I'm really feeling exhausted or kind of like an energy slump, I'll actually go for a workout. I know it sounds really weird, but it actually gets my heart rate pumping and I get more energized after that. The second thing that I do, depending on how depleted I'm feeling, is spending time in nature. There's definitely no lack of it here in the Bay Area. So just spending time with the trees in complete silence, nothing, no social media, nothing. So, yeah.
Oh, that is an important tip, is to turn that social media off for just
a
moment.
Unplug.
Not now, but to turn that off and just have that moment to wake up. Now, you are certainly a very alert, active, awake person. I was reading your site, and I recommend everyone go to Emily's website, which is emilytang.com. And I saw that, and I knew this about you, but just to see it again, that you started a nonprofit while you were still a teenager. And that is so amazing to me because when I was 19, I did a little volunteer work, but I was mostly focused on my university classes and focused on myself and developing my skills. I wasn't starting a nonprofit. So where did you get your inspiration? Did you have role models or leaders in your life growing up that inspired you to do something like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when it comes to starting off anything, whether it's a nonprofit or a project or community, it always starts with, what's the challenge or the problem that I think needs to be solved, or what's the gap. But if you take it back to role models, I tried to think of who was a role model that I looked up to during my childhood. I didn't watch much television growing up. I was always outdoors playing in the gardens, in nature. But somebody who's had a really profound influence and impact on me is my grandmother, Yo Soo Chin, from my mother's side, for her ability to have resilience. She was a single mother. For her dedicated acts of service. She always promoted or, led by love and action. For her nurturing spirit to always want to do good, help others. She always had a smile on her face. And I've really been reflecting on how profound her impact has been on my life as a role model, especially so because she passed away, just recently, a few months ago. And so I've had a lot of time to kind of sit and integrate and, find meaning of how she has left that mark on me, and that her legacy lives on through me and the way I show up in the world today.
you put a smile on my face. You made me think of my grandmother. So that's wonderful when we have people in our families that inspire us that way. And then another element of inspiration is that you have done a lot of work on hunger, fighting poverty. These are obviously issues that are very passionate for you. Now, I know in my own life, I can think of times when my parents were financially insecure. So when I think of a hungry child, I can feel it in my heart. So I'm instantly moved. But what moved you as a teenager to focus on these very important issues?
I think when I started, the primary concern for me was just seeing a lot of my peers not giving back, not wanting to make a difference until they had achieved certain success or a certain milestone in life. And I really wanted to address that gap because there's so much that we can do where we are with what we have, whether we're 17 years old or 30 years old. So that was my primary challenge, or my primary concern was, getting people to take inspired action. And my second point was, there's a lot of need in our areas. There's a lot of need in our neighborhood. And I had a sense of a connection, a personal connection, whether it was me being bullied in high school or in primary school, or also having a shared connection with you, Jason, of knowing what hunger is like growing up. I wasn't, quote unquote, living in poverty per se, but I definitely know what it's like to live on a very, very tight, constricted budget. So.
Yeah. Now, I remember as a teenager and learning about the weight of the world and all the problems in the world. As you grow up from childhood into your teenage years, you start to be aware of all these things, but it can be very, very overwhelming. And besides realizing, oh, there's so many people in need, you're still struggling with all of your insecurities. Some of those insecurities never go away at any age. We're still all struggling. But how did you as a teenager say, I know all of that stuff, but I can make a difference. I can actually do something. How did you find that in yourself to push yourself and push past all those struggles and do something?
I think there's something really special about being young and a little brazen, naive, idealistic. You sort of don't think about the repercussions. You don't think about the consequences. And so you can risk a certain amount of just trying and experimenting and seeing what works and what sticks. And so I think that definitely played a part. Me being 20 years old, I was like, hey, I just want to try this thing out and see if it makes an interest, see if it makes an impact at all. And that's exactly what happened. It was meant to be a couple weekends of gathering peers and community and inspiring people to think about something beyond themselves. And now it's 13 years of weekends on weekends and weekends of, inspiring and moving generations of young people to think beyond themselves and think about something that's bigger. Yeah, I know that the series is called The Big Idea, but oftentimes I think that there's something beautiful about starting small. If you're a community leader, if you're thinking about starting something meaningful for your community, try not to think about the end goal too much, because sometimes you can't overwhelm yourself. You can kind of take yourself out with imposter syndrome, that never goes away, by the way, with fear of failure and all those kinds of things. And so just starting where you are, just try it out. And if it doesn't, then learn from it and go from there.
That's excellent. And that touches into a line that's on your website, which I really enjoyed, which said, make your mistakes. And that really resonated with me. And I'm wondering if you're willing to share a mistake that you learned from and was a good experience overall because you got better improving or learning from that mistake.
Are you talking more within the context of the community or the organization that I lead, or just in general, a mistake that I've made?
Well, I was thinking in terms of the organization that you're developing, although either's good. Whichever one you want to share.
Yeah, I think a mistake for me was feeling the need to please everybody and feeling that urge to kind of make sure that everybody was, ho hum. But I've since learned doing this that you've got to be prepared to be unlikable. You've got to be prepared to make tough decisions and to make challenging choices for the betterment of who you're serving and the communities that you serve. And so a mistake that I've made is definitely trying to make everybody happy. And that can certainly lead to a lot of burnout and also feeling lost and mission drift as well. And I've certainly learned from that, from mentors, but just massive belly flops in the organization. So definitely a huge lesson learned there.
You have to risk being unlikable. That is a great tip. That is a great tip. I love that.
Especially if you want to be a leader, if you want to do something that's never been done before, if you want to make an impact, you've got to be prepared to develop a little bit of a thick skin, which is pretty hard for me. I'm a highly sensitive person. I'm an introvert. I'm an empath. So I'm all up in my feelings and emotions all the time. But yeah, you've got to be willing to be unlikable. That's my new motto as we head into 2021 is unlikable. So
and put yourself out there for the world, because everyone's going to make a mistake, especially at the beginning of any new endeavor or project. It's just part of the deal.
Exactly. And not everyone's going to like you. Not everyone's going to resonate with what you're doing. But when you find your community, when you find your niche, when you find your audience, when you find the people that you're meant to be with, it makes it all worth it. And those are the people that you're meant to be with.
The US government sent you to one of our great programs, the Women's Leadership Academy. And I'm sure you met a lot of other amazing women, such as yourself, at that academy. What do you remember that something special about that academy and experience you gained from going there?
One of my most favorite things is that the common ground that we established, it was just so quick. I mean, we all flew from different parts of ASEAN, right? We never knew each other, but the minute that we landed and we shared stories, we shared tears, we shared laughter, there was an instant bond. And I find that when I connect with other community leaders and change makers, it's an instant connection because we really get it. We know what it feels like to be leading change and to be leading a cause. And I'm just so thankful for the opportunity for the Women's Leadership Academy and YSEALI, because I'm still friends and I still keep in touch with most of the women who are part of that cohort to this day. I mean, I was literally just DMing a few as we got on. So I'm really thankful for the friendships more than anything.
I think that's a really important point, is that no matter what we're trying to do in life, to not think that we're going to accomplish things all by ourselves. It's important to have peers in our life, whether it's our own family or the friends we already have, or we seek a new network, either through the US Embassy, of course, but it can be through other means. But it's important to have a support network, especially when you're having a bad day, because you need those people to pick you up and say, no, what you're doing is important. Keep going, keep trying.
You need, I posted something up on Instagram the other day where, if you're a giver, you also need to be taken care of. If you're serving all the time, if you're loving on others, you also need to be loved. And you make a great point. You need that strong community of cheerleaders around you who are there when you're at rock bottom and are there to celebrate when you're at the mountaintops too. And so who you surround yourself with is so critical when you're in leadership and in life in general, because they really influence the way that you show up and lead in the world.
So you just mentioned love and giving and serving. So I would love if you would tell our audience a little bit about this wonderful program that you have called Blessings in a Bag. Please share.
Yeah, so Blessings in a Bag, it started when I was 20 years old. Initially, we started by collecting donations in kind and redistributing these goods across the Asia region. But now we work primarily with children and young people from very vulnerable communities in Singapore. And we really have this audacious vision where every child has a right to opportunities, to loving support, and a space to build their dreams. And we believe it's possible regardless of their background or circumstances. And so the age group of young people that we work with is 6 years to 18 years old. And that's really our focus at the moment, is working to cheerlead the Singaporean community.
Mhm. How do you determine which communities will receive your focus? Because there are, Singapore is a populous country, many, many different communities, lots of need. So how do you narrow it down? Because as you said, sometimes you have to start small or you have to focus.
Right. That's a great question. When we started, we were referred children and young people through other social service agencies or through other organizations who were not able to journey as intensively or as intentionally as we are able to. We see children every single week, twice a week, every week of the year. And in terms of the communities that we work with, they are what we know as the, vulnerable neighborhoods, or I don't quite like the term underprivileged, so you can see I'm delicately dancing around those terms, but there are about, there are a number of households in Singapore that are catered towards those who are facing quite challenging circumstances, whether financially or otherwise. And so we specifically work with those families. In Singapore, it's called the rental flat communities. So there are about 52,000 households in Singapore that are classified under this. And within that, they, for the most part, not everybody, for the most part, the average monthly income is about $1,500 per household to be part of that that tier or classification. So again, I hate the labels, but just to make it very clear that that is who we're serving as an organization, as a community as well.
Mhm. There was an additional point that you made in one of your YouTube videos on your channel that I thought was really, really interesting. You commented that's, and I'm paraphrasing, but sometimes well-intentioned people will engage in a one-time project. And sometimes a one-time project is actually detrimental to the community compared to a long-term perspective. So please share. How did you discover that? And I'm just going to pause for a moment. I'll let you think of your answer. I just want to say to our audience, please join me in asking questions of Emily. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. We would love to hear from the audience as well.
Great.
Please.
So your question is about how I came to discovering or learning that one-time acts of service might not be as impactful or meaningful or beneficial to the communities that we serve. And I think when it comes to working with children or human beings, but specifically children at this point in time, we found that if children are exposed to a rotating roster of strangers each and every week, there is not much of a good foundation to build a strong, trusting, safe relationship. And we often found that children also developed psychological and emotional trauma, quote unquote trauma, because they would wonder, why am I not good enough that, somebody doesn't want to come back and come back and visit me? Why am I not worthy enough? Why am I not enough? And so we really need to be careful and be very intentional about how we serve communities when it comes to hearts and minds. When we're thinking about, working at a soup kitchen or volunteering on more intangible things, I think that's okay to be ad hoc. But when you're talking about somebody's heart, somebody who's very vulnerable, then we really need to make sure that relationships are built from the ground up, and to give that space, that safe space for both the child and the volunteer at the same time. So.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I certainly understand your point about establishing trust and credibility. When children in particular are facing these kinds of challenges, they may be weary of the person who's trying to help them. So it may take more than one or two times to establish that strong rapport.
Exactly. And I
So
think it goes as well to, Asia. There's a term called voluntourism, where you often have groups that come in for a weekend, take lots of pictures and selfies, and then go back. And it sort of strips away the fact that these children are children and they have a right to privacy. The United Nations has said that every child on the planet has a right to privacy, and we're sort of not allowing them to have that if we follow the trend of voluntourism and taking photos, because children are not zoo animals. They're not put up on display for us to feel good about themselves. And so we just want to be very careful about how we bring people together. I hope I'm being as politically correct as I can be.
Well, you definitely see all the individuals that you're helping as human beings, and that is really the key. So we do have a couple questions from our audience, and I do want to share them with you. We received a question from Ella, and the question is, speaking of the trauma that you mentioned and the trauma that many of us have experienced over the last year to some degree with the pandemic and COVID, the question is, what's the most challenging thing you faced in being a community leader during the pandemic?
Great question, Ella. I think for me, on a personal level, it's very complex because I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area. My team is in Singapore. So it's almost like a double whammy when it comes to remote communications. And I think that what was most challenging for me was really managing and preventing burnout. I think towards the end of last year, I was very close, probably experiencing burnout, because I was running up to 12 midnight every night just to do the communications, the meetings, making sure that we were able to support the families and the children with their well-being and their resources. But I think the communications was really a huge challenge for me as a community leader, and my personal well-being was definitely taken to a whole other universe. Let me say that. But yeah.
Well, that is a very important element of what you're saying, and good advice for any leader. If you're a leader and you're burnt out and you're not taking care of your own mental health and your body and eating well and staying fit, you're not going to be as helpful as you could be to the people you're trying to help. So you do have to balance your personal needs with your effort to help others. So
exactly.
Excellent point.
And I believe that well-being inspires better well-doing. And you hit the nail on the head, Jason, again. We don't just make poor decisions when we're exhausted, or we just are more reactive, and we're not as thoughtful or as intentional as we'd like to be. And so, yeah, just making sure that we're fully supported, that we've got our personal needs met so that we can pour out to other people. That's really important.
I can definitely say my friends know what I'm like if I haven't eaten anything in 8 hours. And it's so easy to get so passionate, you're working hard, and you're like, oh, I don't have time to eat. I have to focus. But you do have to take that moment to take care of yourself. Exactly. So we do have another great question, and I'm going to try to say this name correctly. Apologies if I mispronounce, but it's from Jay Advier. The question is, how do you build the trust safely without perhaps accidentally offending the other person?
I wish I could clarify to mean the other party meaning volunteers, or other party meaning the children. So I'm going to assume the volunteers in this particular context. We're quite intentional about the communications that we share. We have an onboarding procedure in place. So, people who are interested to volunteer, you have to go through we call it a 101 or an info and orientation session. There's a lot of feedback loops and conversations that are happening between our leads within the organization. And we're quite open, and we just put it plainly, exactly what I just shared. We want to build trust safely. We want to make sure it's a safe space, both for children and volunteers. And this is how we can make it happen. And I think that transparency, communication, honesty, and openness goes a very long way, whether you're in nonprofit or in the corporate or for-profit sector. Just being very open, it can definitely be appreciated, and you won't be offending anybody. Definitely won't be offending.
And we have another question, which is a great question. This one comes from Mohammed Yusuf Dimas. I hope I'm understanding your question correctly, but I believe what he's asking is, how do you stay positive when you are trying to be a leader and you're facing a lot of challenges? Perhaps you just can't get the funds or the resources that you need to make the difference you want to make.
Great question. I could go on for hours about this.
I'm sure.
Because I know so many leaders who ask this question all the time, and yeah, the first one is you need to have a high level of self-awareness. Just know what you need. Whether it's self-care or when you're at the limit, just have your toolkit ready, and not an actual toolkit or a box, but just know where you can go, what to do, who you can reach out to. The second thing is just not being ashamed to ask for support or help. And that goes back, circling back to the power of community, the power of who you surround yourself with, the power of mentorship, and just people who are safe spaces for you to just vent and pour out. Last year for 12 months straight, I had a community of executives who worked with me every single month, and I was crying, the ugly cry, full works. I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And you need that safe space for yourself. And if you don't have that, just try to seek out who that could be for you. If it's not anybody you know, then perhaps speaking to a therapist or a counselor could be one step. And then I think in terms of positivity, I have a very strong practice of journaling. I write in my journal a lot, and it helps me be grounded. I have a spiritual practice. My faith keeps me grounded when things are just topsy-turvy and I don't know how to figure out where to go. You need to know what grounds you, what centers you. And so it goes back to self-awareness, asking for help, and who you have surrounding you. So I hope that helps you, Yusuf Dimas. I really do. And if not, feel free to connect with me after. I'm happy to chat. So
I have to say, one of your YouTube videos I found so moving. There's this moment where you're being interviewed and you start crying a little bit. And besides appreciating how honest you are, there's an element of bravery there that you acknowledge. I may be a leader and I may be getting all this stuff done, but I'm a human being. And this is very challenging, hard work to make a difference. And it touched my heart. It was a lovely moment. And I was so happy that you shared that with people who were watching your videos.
Thank you.
So wow, we're almost at 30 minutes, but I have to take a little bit of time.
Mind if I just add on to that point about being human and bravery when it comes to leadership? I think that's something that's been so under the surface for a long time. It took a pandemic and to be a wake-up call for many in leadership to think, oh, I have to be human. I need to connect with my team members and show my human side and celebrate what it means to create a human-centered workplace, showcase what it means to be empathetic and compassionate during this time. And I think that it has taken a pandemic, a global, experience for us to really bring back that humanness and the heart into the workplace. And so definitely love seeing more of that happening more and more.
So I'm going to hold you over a little bit. I warned you in advance, but you had so many amazing things to say, but I always want to ask a few fun questions at the end of the interview, which are a bit lighter, so we can learn a little bit more about you. So my first question is, you are in the United States right now, but your traveling has been very limited because of the pandemic. So if in 2022, you could visit any city in the United States, which one would you choose?
Oh my gosh. I was thinking of a global destination. I wasn't thinking about an American destination. I know for global, it would be, Singapore to see my parents, and then New Zealand. That's been on my bucket list. But oh gosh, within the United States, I don't know. I'm leaning towards Yellowstone up in, I think it's Montana, Yellowstone National Park. But if you're thinking more tropical, then Hawaii. So.
Well, I think that was good. They're both good. Been to both of them. Beautiful. So if I were to visit you when you were in the Singapore, what's some place that maybe people haven't heard of in Singapore that you would want me to visit, either with you or on my own, although I hope you would take me?
Well, perhaps the first place would be where our communities are living in, where we do our work, and just meeting some of the families and the children. That's often a very undiscovered or hidden aspect of Singapore. We see a lot of the glitz, the crazy rich Asians. We see Marina Bay Sands. Very often do we see more of the heartlands and what it means to truly be in the Singapore context. And so, yeah, definitely start there and then go off on a food hunt. I'm definitely craving Singapore food now. Yeah.
Speaking of food, what food is your guilty pleasure?
I have a major sweet tooth, so I hope my dentist is not watching this right now. I literally just saw her earlier today, but yeah, definitely anything with sugar sprinkled on top. So donuts, chocolate cake, anything with sugar is really my weakness.
Very nice. Now, if you're going to eat durian, do you eat durian in your home or in a restaurant?
In my home for sure. Oh my gosh, massive cravings for durian. What about you, Jason? Are you allowed to eat durian where you're at?
I'm allowed. I can't say I've eaten it in my home yet, but I have definitely eaten it in restaurants. So, and I understand why people get addicted to durian. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see.
I love these fun questions.
Good questions. Do you have, tell us one of your favorite US movies.
The one with Fred Rogers, is it Won't You Be My Neighbor? Played by Tom Hanks. I think that's one of my favorites. I don't
Recently, know if Mr. Rogers, a childhood
Rogers, yes.
or a host of children's television. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. That's such a wonderful story. Plus, there was a documentary about Mr. Rogers not too long ago, both worth seeing.
Both had the waterworks for me, so.
Yes, it's so moving. It's so moving, his story. And then my last question, and I'm asking this because you mentioned the X-Men on your website. So I'm just wondering, do you have a favorite superhero?
A favorite superhero? You know what? I actually don't have a favorite superhero at all. I just focus on the real superheroes, you know, the frontliners, the healthcare workers. You know, those are my superheroes that I think about, and that teachers as well, people who are on the front lines every day. Those are really the superheroes that are on my mind at this very moment.
That is a fantastic answer. And after this conversation, you are one of my superheroes. So thank you so much for joining us. You're really an inspiration to all leaders. I learned a lot from talking to you. And one of the things that I really come away from this, and I hope all leaders come away with, is, you know, don't be overwhelmed thinking it has to be the biggest, major, most significant idea ever. Think about how you can make an impact in your community. If it's a small idea, a big idea, just do something and believe in yourself. So thank you so much. I hope everyone views Emily's website. It's emilytang.com. She also has a YouTube channel. We'll put more information below. And if you want to learn more about the Women's Leadership Academy and other programs that the US government has, please reach out to us. We have lots of programs, and we want to be a partner with you as you develop as a leader. So thanks everyone for joining us so much. I hope you join us for the next episode, which will be next Tuesday. Look at our social media platforms, subscribe to our channel, and you'll learn how to tune in. So thanks everyone.